Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Sharp by Design Derecho, and before you guys jump all over me for mispronouncing that, I looked it up on Google, and that's how the lady said it. So there you go. Depending on who you ask, that word is pronounced a bunch of different ways, but it's named after super powerful windstorms, I guess, to kind of simplify it, that apparently we get here in Kansas. I guess I've always referred to them as windstorms. I've never heard that word before, but anyways, nice to learn a new word. This is a really cool knife. I'm a huge fan of Brian Nadeau and Sharp by Design. So thank you so much to Brian Nadeau for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. These are available. A few of these are still left, so I will link it down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Let's go ahead and get a measurement. I didn't have my tape measure ready. Sorry about that. Overall length. This guy was bigger than I thought it was. It's almost 8. It's just shy. It's like 8.35 inches, about the same length as Spyderco PM2. Blade length, golly, it's over 3.75 inches. Just a hair over 3.75 inches on the blade length and 3.5 inches of cutting edge. No surprise there. Sharp by Design knives, always an amazing blade to handle ratio. In fact, I'm going to give you guys some size comparisons up against some other popular Sharp by Design knives from my own collection, up against probably the most popular production knife he's ever released. This is the Evo Typhoon, the full-size one. You can kind of see here the blade to handle ratio theme going on here. Here's the mini one, the mini Evo Typhoon. Again, these are production versions, not the custom ones. And then we have the mini Tempest. Sorry about that. I had to go look that one up, but there's some good examples up against some other knives that he has designed. Let's do some size comparisons up against some knives that are a little bit more common, up against the 8010 and 8020.5. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. So you can see here it's a big knife. It's just not like as robust as something like the 8010. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and Spyderco Para 3. You can see here what I'm talking about. It's actually looking a little bit longer than the PM2. I think it might just be the angle, but should be right about the same size. And then finally, you know what? Let's make sure, because sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I don't measure things correctly. No, that's what it says there. Let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. All right. How's the action? This is a Sharp by Design knife. Does it have the famous lipped detent? Yeah, you can see in there. Yes, it does. It does have that detent, and it is very obvious when you flip it. It flips very similarly to other Sharp by Design knives. I will note the flipper tab is different than on past models. He's kind of like brought this back a little bit. Some people are going to love this, and some people are not. Personally, I like how big this flipper tab is, but this is a common complaint with these style knives. There's a lot of people who just straight up don't like the flipper tab. And it's interesting to me because I've always found that to be really comfortable. Now, this one is still very, very comfortable. It's just a lot smaller and a lot, I mean, it's still the same angle, I guess. It just feels less pointy, I guess, as it's less material like into your finger. I feel like I get less leverage with this, so it's going to be one of those things. I bet I can almost see Brian Nadeau rolling his eyes like, yeah, I can't make everybody happy, you know. And that's true. You can't make everybody happy. So it's just going to depend on how you feel. If you have felt like these flipper tabs were too big, then you will love this, right? As somebody who loved the old flipper tab, I think it's just fine. I still prefer the old flipper tab, but I think this works just fine. I feel like I get plenty of leverage off of it. The flip is still incredibly satisfying, and the detent is wonderful. You can also use this fuller here to reverse flick it, which I actually really like. This is not the case on stuff like the Sharp by Design Evo Typhoon, where the fuller is there and you can see it, but it's inaccessible in the closed position. On this guy, you can definitely use it, and it's very, very satisfying. Access to the lock bar is wonderful because of how he does this. It's actually the lock bar insert itself that sticks up over the frame, making it super accessible and not pinchy or irritating to the finger, right? It's just, I mean, it sounds so silly, but it is a thing, right? Especially if you sit there and you flip your knives over and over and over again, you start to notice stuff like that. Don't put your finger on the lock bar. That'll do that. 4,300 uploads. I'm still doing stuff like this. Jeez. But yeah, the access there is really great, and there is no double clutch. It's just really nice. These are manufactured by Riot. Confirmed that. There's no change here with this model still being made by Riot, and it's very, very obvious. Really, really nice work. I've always used Brian Nadeau's designs as an example when I talk about how Riot is a wonderful OEM and they manufacture some awesome stuff. But depending on the designer, the final product can be widely varying in terms of the overall feel of quality. Sharp by Design is basically the combination of Sharp by Design and Riot is essentially peak OEM, whereas other designs that were made by Riot seem a little bit lacking in the polishing department. So, yeah, this is really good, and it's identical to the other production stuff in terms of the overall quality. Action's great, right? All of that. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's a little bit thicker, but it's contoured, which I'll take. That's a big deal to me. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This guy is not going to be difficult to carry. I mean, like I said, it's the same overall length as the Spyderco Para PM2, but because there's a much better blade to handle ratio, that means when it's folded up, it's substantially more compact than something like the PM2. Might weigh a little bit more, but the knife is going to weigh slightly different depending on which material you, I mean, like combination of materials that you get, full tie or titanium with an inlay, etc. But we'll weigh it here in a sec. But yeah, in terms of carry profile, it's just really not a cumbersome object. It might be on the large side for some people just in terms of overall length, but for most people, I don't think it's really going to be all that big of a deal. Let's go ahead and weigh it and introduce, for the first time in 6 years, a change to the scale. The old scale is dead. It died, finally. So this is the new scale, which for some reason did not save the units that I was on. But anyways, weight on this guy is 3.9 ounces, which I don't think is bad considering you're looking at essentially a 3.8 inch blade. So let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness here real quick. Blade stock thickness on this guy, probably 145 to 150. Yeah, about 150 thousandths there. And it's similar to the other Sharp by Design models that that I've got in my own personal collection, so no real change there. Materials, we didn't talk about that before we weighed it. Titanium, and in this case, I believe that's a G10 inlay. This blue right here. They have them in full titanium. I think they have carbon fiber. There's actually a few different versions, but the non-inlaid versions are going to be the least expensive. So if you're looking at it and you're like, I don't want the inlay there, yeah, you can get them in just titanium. They even had an all-black one. Anyways, let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot, which only has the fastener head on one side, is a T8. And then in true Sharp by Design fashion, you probably noticed with some of these other models here that they don't have any visible hardware outside of the pivot on the show side. And it's the same thing here, which I love. That means at the fasteners, in this case, it's legitimately just one. It's the pivot and one, and we've got a seam construction back here. One fastener goes all the way through, probably threads into the titanium over here, and you just don't see the head. Still plenty of threads. Considering how this comes together, that means there's room for plenty of threads to hold in there, so he really doesn't need anything else, and that is also, to my knowledge, a T8. That is wonderful. That makes these knives ridiculously easy to take apart and put back together. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Needed a breath. All of that came out in one breath. I had to take a huge breath. I'm not even going to edit that out. I passed out in the middle of this review and talked so much. Jeez. Anyways, yeah, really, really great. I love that they use T8 throughout. That's just excellent. And then you have a hidden screw underneath here for the pocket clip, which you can access as soon as you pull that screw out and the pivot out. Anyways, meat and potatoes time. How are the ergonomics? Well, they're great. I love the ergonomics on these. A lot of people complain about the pocket clips being too sharp, and they are a little sharp. I never really noticed that until people started pointing it out. I always pointed to the Sharp by Design clip as being one of my favorite milled clips on the market, and the truth is, it absolutely still is. So it's one of those things where personally, I didn't naturally notice that it was sharp. Using these knives, squeezing really hard, cutting. I have another one of these. I don't use this one because it's a special one in Damasteel, but I have another one of those, just plain in M390, and I carry and use it all the time. And bearing down on it or squeezing really hard, I gotta be perfectly honest, I just don't notice it. But if I take my finger and drag it across the tip of this pocket clip, yeah, it does feel a little bit sharp. So it's kind of like, pointing it out, it's kind of like, yeah, I wish that was a little more knocked down. But in practice, it hasn't really ever bothered me. So I guess it's just going to depend on, who you are. And if you do a lot of touching of the pocket clip with your index finger, then it will probably bother you, right? It is definitely a sharp little ledge there, but outside of that, the pocket clip, in my opinion, is fantastic. The rise in the bill is great, in and out of the pocket, very, very easy, etc. Ergonomics, really great. I've never held a Sharp by Design knife that didn't have excellent ergonomics. I mean, these are essentially, they're almost like radiused edges. It's not just a chamfer. I mean, that is really, really nice. Let me show you like what I'm talking about here. Like you can see the edge here of the 80-20.5, which is a very comfortable knife. It's a beautifully ergonomic knife, but not like this. Like that's really beautifully machined. It's just little details like that. That's why I always say I like his designs. It's just a little bit more thought out. This is really comfortable, and it feels like it was specifically designed for the human hand, which you would think would be a super common thing in the knife world, right? The handle, that's what you're supposed to hang on to. As many knives as I've handled, sometimes I'm like, did the person who designed this actually design it for a hand, or was it designed for like a robot, clamper thing? Like, this isn't comfortable. This is very comfortable. Obviously designed for the human hand. Wonderful, functional, jimping, extended so that you can actually make use of it. A little harpoon. Not really a harpoon notch, just a little notch right there, I guess. It's just like the rise in the back of the blade. But just really, really good. Nothing that makes my ergonomic experience negative, I guess. Really good. I also like how the titanium sort of rises up to meet the pivot and make it flush there. It's a really nice touch. This is a Riot knife, so the inlay work is absolutely perfect, and it's on both sides, which is also really, really cool. Personally, I kind of like the blue. It's not normally something that I would choose, but now having it here in front of me, I kind of appreciate it, right? So that's cool. It seems like I'm always going with the carbon fiber or the Damascus and stuff like that. But this is nice. The blade, that is definitely the part of the knife that is creating the most character. That's a hawkbill if I've ever seen one. And it's got like a recurve. And this can be not super duper fun to sharpen, and it can be kind of difficult to keep consistent in terms of the final cutting bevel. But in use, there's something really satisfying about tearing into a box with a hawkbill blade. And I know those of you who carry karambits or similar, something that's in the same general vicinity of this blade shape, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Digging that hawkbill blade into cardboard and just like trying, it's just really satisfying. Aesthetically, it's not my favorite thing. I don't love how it looks, right? But I can't be like, blade review bad because it's not my favorite blades. That's very subjective, right? So it depends on the cutting task. Truthfully, a lot of the stuff that I do day to day, this blade shape actually is, not only fun to use, but it's pretty efficient. But it's not going to be ideal for everything. And that tip is definitely on the delicate side. Wow, it gets really, really pointy and thin. I'm sure that there's like a self-defense thing, some self-defense purpose for a blade. I have no idea. I'm sure that this thing will take out the thickest of jean-jacketed bad guys, right? If you that group of hooligans behind the Walgreens always wearing those tough jean jackets. I can't get through them. They always beat the crap out of me. Well, now you got a hawkbill. I'm totally joking, obviously. I don't think a pocket knife makes a good self-defense weapon or offensive weapon. I don't know. I don't use knives that way. I use them as tools. But as far as doing day-to-day tasks, I enjoy this blade shape. I think it's cool. It's just the tip's definitely going to be a little bit delicate, but as long as you're not like, jamming this into stuff or trying to, screw in fasteners with it or anything like that, you should be good to go. The edge is actually surprisingly thin, and I'll give you kind of an example. I mean, cutting paper is not really proving much, but I'll give you an example of what it's like to slice a piece of paper with this. Pretty darn thin, surprisingly. I looked at it and I thought, yeah, the cutting geometry is not really going to be all that great, but you know what? I mean, look at that. Just, woo! It's really, I can't explain it. Cutting open a box with something like this is super satisfying. So, not my favorite thing to look at, but it works really, really well. Anyways, I want to point out this little area up here. I think this is super satisfying to look at. You have the fuller, which is finished differently. That's kind of the machine satin finish, I guess, which isn't my favorite finish, but whatever. They have, I think, at least a couple of different finishes. And we have this swedge up here, and this fuller ends inside of the swedge zone, I guess I'm going to call that for lack of a better term. And then this area up here, you have the flat and then the bevel, which sort of rises up to meet this area here before it turns into the swedge. And it's just really nicely done. It just looks good. Leaving this like fully flat, well, I guess it's actually, hold on a second. Yeah, it's hollow ground. Leaving it like that all the way up and just having like a little swedge up here without the fuller, I think would have looked weird. And I imagine it's a little bit tricky to get this all to come together. Right? I mean, it's a little bit different here with the blade on the Evo Typhoon, but just really, really nice. I like how that looks. And I don't know that I would have the slightest idea how to make all of that come together. So I just really appreciate that. But anyways, the seam construction here is cool. And if you're going to do that, you need to have somebody who can machine the parts absolutely identical, because if you don't do it perfectly, it's really noticeable. Some older Kershaw Launch Series knives, because those always have seam construction, meaning that it's not a backspacer that divide. I mean, like it's the same here. It's the same on this guy, right? All of these Sharp by Design knives are like this. And, some people might want a backspacer. I'm trying to find something that's just got like a traditional backspacer. Okay, it's like the Spyderco PM2, I guess, has a custom backspacer. Sometimes this looks better and sometimes this looks better, but the only time that this is going to look better is if the parts are absolutely identical. In the example I was about to give, some of the older Kershaw Launch Series knives, where the fit and finish was not always perfect. They were kind of like this, and it's ugly. It doesn't look good. So these are made by Riot, and their manufacturing is always perfect, at least in my experience. So that looks really good, and it's less parts, right? I don't know if it's more or less expensive to do. I would venture to guess it's slightly less expensive to do, but you don't have a backspacer. You just have two pieces that come together. So I think this simplifies the disassembly process, and it looks good, so thumbs up. I think that's cool. There's no lanyard thing. Oh no, who cares? If you like lanyards, you can attach one to the pocket clip, I guess, if you really have to, but outside of that, there's no option there, so darn it. Pocket clip is only right-handed. This is one of those things that's real tricky because people are like, you're always standing up for left-handed people until it's a design that you love and you don't want it aesthetically ruined with a cutout for the pocket clip. And you're right. This is what I'm being selfish here. I'm like, left-handed people matter until it's a design that I really like. Yeah. I can understand why we didn't do a filler tab or holes over here. These designs are obviously intentionally made to hide as much hardware as possible. And if he milled a spot out right here, it would definitely take away from the aesthetic flow. Brian Nadeau is really good about not forcing his logo down our throats and not forcing us to look at things we don't need to look at, right? It's very thoughtful. So I'm not sure how he could have implemented a lefty clip. Again, I've always said that kind of the wraparound where they mill a slot into the titanium scales and it wraps around and goes in there. That's an idea, but that too might sort of disrupt the aesthetic flow of this. I'm getting really poetic in my defense. So would it be nice if left-handed people were included? Yes. Is that the case here? No. Left-handed versions of these knives I think would be great, but it gets costly. I know that these are not massive batches. I know it's really expensive to work this type of stuff out with OEMs like Riot. And I don't know. Left-handed people, there's not a version of this for you, but I know that a lot of left-handed people out there are used to just buying right-handed knives and carrying them as right-handed knives or left-handed knives, which I don't think is really safe, but I know that left-handed people have just kind of dealt with it. It would have been nice to have a lefty option, but that's not the case here. Pocket clip retention is fantastic. The strength of this clip, the reason I like this so much is because it's a milled clip and the material is very thick. It's titanium, right? But the retention is excellent. In and out of the pocket's very easy. I don't feel like the thing's going to fly out of my pocket, but instead of just being flat like a lot of milled clips are, it comes down and swoops up just a little bit. So there's not enough there to really, grab onto anything. But even if it did, like, there's no way. Like, you'd have to be running, and it would have to like catch it perfectly to even bend this thing, right? But more than likely, it would just pull the knife out of your pocket. Just very unlikely that that would happen. This is the type of pocket clip where if you are next to your vehicle, it will scratch the beans out of your vehicle. That edge of the clip is not rounded off like something like the MXG Deep Carry clip, which can still scratch a vehicle, right? But this is thick and pointy, right? You rub up against a vehicle with something like this, you're going to scratch it. So I guess, do with that information what you will. There is a stop pin locator right here, very deep, shouldering, no blade play up, down, left, or right. This knife runs on bearings. That was probably obvious. No lock stick, no double clutch, no pivot lash. Incredibly consistent in here, and a perfect detent considering you, need to be able to use the flipper tab and the fuller to deploy it. So yeah. These come in, the base price of these is about $350, and a lot of people are going to say that's super duper expensive for titanium and M390, and I'm going to say the same thing I always say. This is not your run-of-the-mill, made by whoever on Amazon, because now there's like a bajillion different brands who are also making knives with titanium and M390 and just slapping them together and throwing a $220 price tag on them. This is not the same thing. This is much more thought out, more time and energy went into the design, more time and energy went into the machining. Yes, it's made by machine, but it's still costly to do. Riot makes a better product, and this is something that for a lot of people is not apparent until you actually handle it. So many times I've had people question, like, how can you say is it really worth that much more money, versus what else I can get in the same materials? And then they finally go ahead and buy one. And it's a lot of times with Sharp by Design and they go, oh, geez, okay, yeah, I totally get it now. It really is different. And that's the truth. It is. A lot of it is the feeling in his lipped detent system. But on top of that, just the little tiny things. You pick up a Sharp by Design knife, and I feel like if I laid out 100 knives on the table and had my eyes closed, even my own knives, there's some of them I'd probably get wrong, but I would know a Sharp by Design knife immediately. I am 100% confident. I would know it immediately because it has a very distinct feel. It feels like it was polished and then polished again and then machined again and polished and polished and polished. It's just, that's how it is, right? This is going to come down to personal taste, right? Is a hawkbill knife going to give you a specific advantage day to day? I don't think so. If you really like the hawkbill blade and you like Sharp by Design knives, then I think that this will be perfect. Absolutely. But if you don't like the hawkbill blade, obviously this isn't going to be for you. As far as the value goes, do I think they're priced correctly? Absolutely. I've never seen a Sharp by Design production knife that I thought was priced incorrectly. These definitely stand out. And there are knives that are manufactured by Chinese companies that cost $100 more that are nowhere near as high quality in terms of, feeling of action or execution, finish work, all of that. I don't really have a problem with that. If you decide to pick up a Sharp by Design knife, it will be immediately apparent to you why they cost more money. I don't have an issue with that. I have never actually seen where Riot talks about what they heat treat these M390 blades to, but people have been telling me that it's like 60 to 62. So I think that is the case. I didn't notice that this edge fatigued immediately when I cut open some cardboard boxes, but I didn't put it through enough, of a workout to really be able to tell. So if it ended up being 5961, that also wouldn't surprise me. It's kind of the industry standard, but I don't actually know what the Rockwell hardness is on this. I do like the knife. I don't like it as much as my my Mini Tempest, my Mini Evo Typhoon, or my full-size Typhoon especially. But it is cool, and it is built with just as much quality as the other models. So that's pretty much it. Again, I will link this down in the description. You guys can check it out if you want to. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.